The ground shook again, and Zara Cleth pressed her forearms against the metal beam that trapped her legs. Pain shot through her crystalline blue skin as she tried to move, but the heavy debris would not budge. 3 days had passed since the asteroid storm hit Zarian 7, and she was still stuck in the ruins of the communications center, where she had been working when everything went wrong. Zara belonged to the Viridian species, known across the galaxy for building the most advanced technology. But her people were not strong like humans or tough like the rock people from Granite Prime. Her bones were delicate and her internal organs could fail easily if damaged. The toxic gases that leaked from the broken life support systems around her made breathing harder with each passing hour. She had tried calling for help, but her emergency beacon was crushed under a fallen wall panel during the first impact. The main settlement on Zarian 7 was far away, and she knew the galactic emergency. Response teams only saved the big population centers. Small outposts like hers were left behind when disasters struck. It was just how things worked in the frontier, regions where profit mattered more than individual lives. The mining planet had been peaceful before the storm. Zara had come here 6 months ago to upgrade the communication systems that linked the remote mining operations to the main hub. She enjoyed the quiet work and the chance to improve technology that helped people stay connected across the vast distances of space. Now that same technology lay in twisted ruins around her. Water dripped from a broken pipe above her head, and she caught what she could in her mouth. Her species needed more water than most aliens, and dehydration was becoming a serious problem. The recycling units that normally provided clean water had stopped working when the power grid failed. Emergency batteries had died yesterday, and now only emergency lighting remained. Zara closed her eyes and tried to stay calm. Panic would only make her hearts beat faster and waste the little energy she had left. Yes, hearts plural, because Viridians had 2 hearts that worked together to pump their unique blood through their systems. Both hearts were struggling now as toxic fumes slowly poisoned her. She thought about her family back on the Viridian homeworld of Crystal Shore. Her parents were both engineers like her, and they had taught her to always find solutions to impossible problems. But what solution existed when you were trapped alone on a planet that the entire galaxy had already given up on? The asteroid storm had been massive, bigger than anything the weather prediction systems had seen before. Chunks of space rock the size of buildings had crashed into the planet for hours, destroying everything in their path. The mining operations were shut down and most people evacuated, but Zara had stayed behind to send final status reports to the Home Office. That decision might cost her life. She tried moving again, but the metal beam pressed down harder. Her right legs were completely numb now, and she worried about permanent damage. Even if rescue came, she might never walk properly again. The thought scared her more than dying, because Viridians valued independence and mobility above almost everything else. Outside the ruined building, the wind howled through the broken structures. Zarian 7 had never been a beautiful planet, but now it looked like the surface of hell. The storms had stirred up so much dust that the sky stayed dark even during the day. Lightning flashed constantly as the disturbed atmosphere tried to find balance again. Zara had been an engineer for 12 years and had worked on dozens of different worlds. She had seen disasters before, but nothing like this. The sheer scope of destruction was beyond anything she could have imagined. Entire districts of the main settlement were gone, erased as if they had never existed. Her breathing became more labored as the toxic gases continued to build up in the enclosed space. The air recycling system had been damaged in the collapse, and what little fresh air remained was slowly being poisoned. She calculated that she had perhaps 1 more day before the gas levels became fatal. The irony was not lost on her that she was surrounded by communication equipment but could not contact anyone. Broken transmitters and shattered relay stations lay everywhere, but none of them worked. She had tried to repair some of the simpler units, but without proper tools and with her limited mobility, the task was impossible. Sleep came in short periods between waves of pain. In her dreams, she was back home on Crystal Shore, working in the bright laboratories where Viridian technology was born. Her people had mastered biotechnology and energy systems that other species could barely understand. Yet, for all their knowledge, they had never learned the kind of stubborn determination that kept other species fighting when logic said to give up. As darkness fell on her third day of imprisonment, Zara wondered if anyone in the galaxy even knew. She was missing. The personnel records might list her as evacuated or dead. Either way, no one would come looking for a single Viridian engineer on a planet that no longer mattered to anyone. But somewhere in the black void above Zarian 7, sensors were picking up her fading life signs? Dr. Jake Morrison stared at the readings on his bioscanner and frowned. The signal was weak but definitely Viridian, coming from the abandoned sector of Zarian 7 that all the official rescue teams had declared dead. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked the readings again. 3 days after the asteroid disaster, finding any life signs in that area should have been impossible. Jake had been running medical supply missions to the outer frontier for 8 years, ever since he left his comfortable position at the Central Medical Academy. His ship, the Harmony, was designed for exactly this kind of work, but even he had limits. The Galactic Medical Authority had specifically ordered all independent operators to stay away from Zarian 7 until the storms cleared. "Jake, you are looking at that scanner like it owes you money," said Lisa Park, his medical assistant, as she entered the bridge. Lisa was young but tough, the kind of person who thrived in the dangerous frontier regions where most medics refused to work. She had joined his crew 2 years ago after graduating from emergency medicine training. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to the screen. "Viridian life signs, Sector 7 of Zarian 7, definitely alive but failing fast." Lisa leaned over to study the readings, and her expression grew serious. "That sector was evacuated 3 days ago. No one is supposed to be there." "Supposed to be is different from actually being," Jake replied. He had learned long ago that official reports often missed people who fell through the cracks. The frontier was full of individuals who got forgotten when bureaucrats made their neat lists of who mattered and who did not. The Harmony was currently docked at Frontier Station Alpha, taking on medical supplies for the refugee centers that were handling evacuees from Zarian 7. Jake had planned to deliver the supplies and then head to his next assignment. But the life sign reading changed everything. Someone was dying down there while everyone else had given up looking. The atmospheric conditions around Zarian 7 are still dangerous, Lisa warned. 3 other rescue ships tried to land in that sector and had to turn back. The electromagnetic interference from the storms is making navigation almost impossible. Jake studied the storm patterns on his weather display. The asteroid impacts had stirred up the planet's atmosphere in ways that the weather computers could not predict. Lightning struck constantly, and the winds changed direction without warning. Flying through that mess would be like threading a needle while riding a bucking horse, but Jake had advantages that the other rescue teams lacked. His ship was smaller and more maneuverable than the big galactic emergency response vessels. More importantly, he had spent years learning to fly in conditions that would ground most pilots. The frontier had taught him that sometimes you had to take risks that looked crazy to save lives that others had written off. "I am going down there," he announced, moving toward the pilot's chair. "Jake, the medical authority specifically ordered all independent operators to avoid that area." Lisa protested. "If you disobey direct orders, they could pull your license." "Let them try," Jake said grimly. "I did not become a doctor to follow orders that let people die." Jake's history with the medical authority was complicated. They respected his skill but disliked his tendency to ignore regulations when lives were at stake. He had been reprimanded dozens of times for taking unauthorized risks, but his success rate was too high for them to ground him permanently. Frontier medicine required people who bent rules, and Jake bent them better than most. The Harmony undocked from the station and headed towards Zarian 7 maximum speed. Jake had modified the ship's engines himself, trading fuel efficiency for raw power when emergency situations demanded it. The bioscanner continued to track the Viridian life signs, but they were getting weaker with each passing hour. As they approached the planet, the first signs of the disaster became visible. The normally brown surface of Zarian 7 was covered with dark clouds that swirled in unnatural patterns. Lightning flickered constantly within the storm systems, and the electromagnetic readings on Jake's instruments went crazy as they entered the upper atmosphere. "Hull stress is increasing," Lisa reported from the navigation station. "The turbulence is worse than anything in our flight databases." Jake gripped the controls tighter as the ship began to shake. Flying through the storm was like being inside a washing machine filled with rocks. The artificial gravity system struggled to compensate for the violent motion, and everything that was not secured went sliding across the cabin. The first lightning strike hit them at 20,000 feet, causing sparks to fly from several control panels. Jake quickly rerouted power around the damaged systems and continued descending. His hands moved automatically across the controls, making constant adjustments to keep the ship stable in the chaotic winds. "There," Lisa called out, pointing to a break in the storm clouds. "I can see the surface." The landscape below looked like the end of the world. Craters from asteroid impacts dotted the ground, and twisted metal structures jutted up from massive piles of debris. What had once been an organized mining settlement was now a graveyard of destroyed buildings and shattered equipment. Jake flew low over the ruins, using the bioscanner to track the life signs to their source. The signal led them to a collapsed communications center in the middle of the devastated sector. The building had been crushed by falling debris, but the scanner indicated that someone was definitely alive inside. Finding a safe landing spot near the ruined building took several minutes of careful maneuvering. The ground was unstable and covered with sharp metal fragments that could puncture the ship's landing gear. Jake finally settled on a flat area about 200 meters from the collapsed structure. Life support readings show toxic gas concentrations in the area, Lisa warned as they prepared to disembark. "We will need full environmental suits." Jake was already pulling on his protective gear. After 8 years of frontier medicine, he could suit up for dangerous environments in under 3 minutes. The bioscanner showed that whoever was trapped in that building had very little time left. Every second counted now, and Jake Morrison had never been the kind of doctor who gave up when seconds mattered most. Jake Morrison stepped carefully through the twisted wreckage of the communications center, his bioscanner beeping steadily as he followed the life signs deeper into the ruins. The environmental suit felt bulky, but the toxic gas readings on his display showed why it was necessary. Without protection, the poisonous atmosphere would kill a human in minutes. "The signal is coming from below," Lisa's voice crackled through the communication system. She was monitoring from the ship while Jake did the dangerous work of navigating through the unstable debris. "About 15 meters down and to your left." Jake aimed his helmet light into the darkness and saw a narrow gap between two massive concrete slabs. The opening was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but the bioscanner confirmed that the Viridian was somewhere beyond that passage. He tested the stability of the debris before committing his weight to the precarious structure. The gap led to what had once been an underground maintenance area. Emergency lighting still functioned here, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Jake could see where the ceiling had partially collapsed, creating a maze of fallen beams and tangled cables. Every step had to be planned carefully because one wrong move could bring down more debris. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice echoing through the confined space. "My name is Dr. Morrison. I am here to help you." A weak voice answered from somewhere ahead. I am here, please." The words were spoken in heavily accented standard Galactic, but Jake could hear the desperation clearly. He moved faster now, using his medical scanner to guide him through the safest path toward the voice. The readings showed that whoever was trapped had multiple injuries and was suffering from severe dehydration and gas poisoning. Jake found her wedged beneath a heavy metal beam in what had been the central control room. The Viridian female was conscious but barely responsive, her crystalline blue skin pale and cracked. 4 arms lay at awkward angles, and Jake could immediately see that at least 2 were broken. More concerning were the readings from his medical scanner that showed internal bleeding and respiratory distress. "My name is Zara," she whispered as Jake knelt beside her. "I thought no one would come." "Well, someone did come," Jake said, already unpacking his emergency medical kit, "and we are going to get you out of here." Jake had treated Viridians before during his frontier career and knew their physiology well. The dual heart system made them resilient in some ways but fragile in others. The gas poisoning was affecting her respiratory system while the internal injuries threatened the delicate organs that kept her hearts pumping properly. The first priority was stabilizing her condition enough to survive the extraction process. Jake inserted in 4-line to provide fluids and medication while carefully examining the beam that trapped her legs. The metal structure was part of the building's support system, and removing it incorrectly could cause more collapse. "Lisa, I need you to run stress analysis on the building structure," Jake said into his communicator. "I have to move a load-bearing beam, and I need to know what will happen when I do." While Lisa worked on the structural analysis from the ship, Jake continued treating Zara's injuries. Her left arm was clearly broken and needed to be immobilized. More seriously, the internal bleeding was getting worse and would require immediate surgery once they reached the ship. "The structural analysis shows that moving the beam will likely cause a partial collapse of the section you are in," Lisa reported. "But it looks like there is a clear escape route if you move quickly after extraction." Jake studied the beam more carefully and realized he would need to use the ship's emergency winch system to lift it safely. The alternative was trying to cut through the metal with plasma tools, but that would take too long and might destabilize the structure even more. "I'm going to get the portable winch," Jake told Zara. "This might hurt when we lift the beam, but it is the only way to get you free." Zara nodded weakly. "Do what you must. I trust you." The confidence in her voice surprised Jake. Most aliens he had treated viewed human medicine with suspicion, preferring their own species' medical techniques. But desperation had a way of breaking down such prejudices, and Zara clearly understood that Jake represented her only chance for survival. Jake made 2 trips back to the ship to retrieve the portable winch system and additional medical supplies. Each journey through the unstable debris field was dangerous, but he moved with the efficiency of someone who had performed similar rescues many times before. Lisa helped by remotely monitoring the building's structural stability and warning him when shifting debris created new hazards, setting up the winch required, attaching support cables to solid anchor points in the ruins. Jake used his engineering knowledge to distribute the load properly, ensuring that lifting the beam would not cause catastrophic collapse. The process took precious time, but rushing would only create more problems. "Ready?" Jake announced as he positioned himself beside Zara with the emergency stretcher. "When I activate the winch, I need you to stay completely still until I can slide the stretcher under you." The winch motor hummed as it began lifting the heavy beam. Metal groaned and concrete dust fell from above as the structure shifted under the changing load. Jake watched his scanner readings carefully. Ready to abort the operation if Zara's vital signs deteriorated further, the beam rose slowly, inch by careful inch, until there was enough clearance to extract Zara. Jake quickly slid the stretcher into position and began the delicate process of moving her onto it without causing additional injury. Her broken bones required careful handling, and the internal bleeding made every movement potentially dangerous. "Got you," Jake said as he secured Zara to the stretcher. "Now we get out of here fast." The escape route led through a different path than Jake had used to enter, avoiding the most unstable areas of the collapsed building. Lisa guided them remotely while monitoring for structural changes that might block their exit. Behind them, the section where Zara had been trapped began to collapse as the removed beam caused a chain reaction in the damaged support system. Jake carried the stretcher with steady determination, his frontier training allowing him to navigate the treacherous terrain while maintaining the smooth motion necessary to protect his patient. Zara remained conscious throughout the extraction, her eyes fixed on Jake's face with an expression of amazement that someone had actually come for her. They reached the surface just as the underground section they had left began to fully collapse. Jake did not look back as he carried Zara toward the waiting ship, where Lisa had the medical bay prepared for emergency surgery. The medical bay aboard the Harmony hummed with activity as Jake worked to stabilize Zara's failing systems. The Viridian lay unconscious on the surgical table while monitors displayed the complex readings of her dual heart system and other unique biological functions. Lisa assisted by managing the life support equipment and preparing surgical instruments with the precision of someone trained in frontier emergency medicine. Her internal bleeding is worse than the scanner readings indicated, Jake said, studying the detailed medical displays. The gas poisoning has also damaged her respiratory system more severely than I first thought. Treating Viridians required knowledge that most doctors never bothered to learn. Their crystalline bone structure meant that fractures healed differently than in other species, while their dual circulatory system could compensate for certain injuries but failed catastrophically when both hearts were stressed simultaneously. Jake had spent years studying alien physiology specifically for situations like this. The surgery began with repairing the internal bleeding that threatened Zara's life most immediately. Jake used microsurgical techniques to seal damaged blood vessels while carefully avoiding the nerve clusters that were unique to Viridian anatomy. One wrong cut could cause permanent paralysis or worse, but his steady hands moved with the confidence of someone who had performed similar operations under impossible conditions. Blood pressure is stabilizing, Lisa reported from her monitoring station. Both hearts are responding well to the surgical repairs. Jake had modified many of his surgical tools over the years to work better with different alien species. The plasma scalpel he used was calibrated specifically for Viridian tissue density, while the biosealant had been enhanced to work with their unique cellular structure. Innovation and adaptation were essential skills for any doctor working in the frontier regions where standard medical protocols often failed. The broken bones required different treatment than human fractures. Viridian bones were partially crystalline and needed special alignment procedures to heal properly. Jake used micromanipulators to position the bone fragments with mathematical precision, knowing that even small errors could cause permanent disability. "How did you learn to treat my people so well?" Zara asked weakly as she regained consciousness during a break in the surgical procedures. "I studied," Jake replied simply, adjusting the pain medication to keep her comfortable. "When you work the frontier, you learn that every species has different needs. If you want to save lives, you learn whatever it takes." The comment surprised Zara because most galactic medical facilities specialized in treating only one or two species. The complexity of alien biology meant that doctors usually focused on what they knew best, rather than attempting to master multiple physiological systems. Jake's approach was unusual and clearly effective. Over the next several hours, Jake completed the surgical repairs and began the long process of treating the gas poisoning that had damaged Zara's respiratory system. This required custom mixed medications that had to be prepared specifically for Viridian biochemistry. Too little and the treatment would fail, too much and the cure could be worse than the poison. "Why did you come for me?" Zara asked during one of her more alert periods. "Your people had no obligation to rescue a Viridian engineer from an abandoned planet." Jake paused in his work to look at her directly. "Because you were alive and needed help? That is all the obligation I need." The simple honesty of his answer left Zara speechless. In her experience, galactic civilization operated on contracts and mutual benefit agreements. People helped others when they gained something in return or when laws required it. The idea that someone would risk their life and career for a complete stranger from a different species challenged everything she had been taught about how the universe worked. As Zara's condition improved, she began to observe how Jake and Lisa worked together. Their medical bay was equipped with technology she had never seen before, devices that seemed to combine human innovation with adaptations for treating multiple alien species. The equipment was clearly custom-built rather than standard galactic medical technology. "This ship is designed specifically for frontier rescue work," Jake explained when Zara asked about the unusual equipment. "I modified everything myself to handle whatever situations I might encounter." Jake told her about his background while he worked on the final stages of her treatment. He had left a prestigious position at the Central Medical Academy 8 years ago after losing his family in a preventable medical emergency. The tragedy had taught him that following regulations and playing it safe sometimes meant that people died, who could have been saved with greater effort and innovation. The big medical facilities have rules for everything, Jake said as he checked Zara's latest test results. They follow protocols and procedures that work most of the time for most patients, but the frontier is different. Out here you often have to invent solutions on the spot. The Harmony was equipped with a biofabrication unit that could synthesize medications for different species, surgical robots programmed with Jake's own techniques, and life support systems capable of maintaining dozens of different atmospheric requirements. Everything was designed around the principle that no one should die simply because they were different or inconvenient to treat. Zara learned that Jake had saved hundreds of beings from dozens of different species during his frontier career. His files contained detailed notes on alien physiology, innovative treatment protocols, and equipment modifications that had been shared with other frontier medics. The man who had risked everything to save her was apparently famous in certain circles for exactly this kind of work. The Galactic Medical Authority must approve of your methods if you have saved so many lives, Zara commented. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. The medical authority tolerates my methods because my success rate is too high to ignore. But they would prefer that I follow standard procedures and only treat patients I am specifically certified to handle. The tension between Jake's results and his methods was an ongoing source of conflict with the medical bureaucracy. They wanted predictable outcomes from predictable procedures, while Jake believed that medicine required constant adaptation and innovation. His approach worked, but it made administrators nervous because it could not be easily regulated or replicated. As Zara's recovery progressed, she began to understand that her rescue was part of something larger than just one emergency response. Jake represented a different philosophy of medicine, one that put individual lives above institutional convenience. His willingness to risk his career and safety for someone he had never met was not an anomaly but a core principle that guided everything he did. I want to help, Zara said suddenly, as Jake completed her final round of treatments. What you do here, this work, I want to be part of it. Jake studied her expression carefully. Frontier medicine is dangerous work. You nearly died on Zarian 7, and that was just from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you work with us, you will be deliberately going into dangerous situations on a regular basis. Zara's forearms moved in a gesture that indicated firm resolve in Viridian body language. Someone saved my life when everyone else had given up on me. Now I want to help save others who might be abandoned the same way. 3 weeks after her rescue, Zara stood in the engineering section of the Harmony, her forearms working simultaneously on different components of an upgraded medical scanner. Her recovery had been remarkable, testament to both Jake's surgical skill and the resilience of Viridian physiology. More importantly, she had thrown herself into learning everything about frontier medicine with the enthusiasm of someone who had found her true calling. The bioresonance frequencies need to be calibrated differently for each species, Jake explained as he watched her work. Humans radiate at one frequency, Viridians at another, and the rock people from Granite Prime at something completely different. Zara's engineering background made her a natural at understanding the technical aspects of medical equipment, but she was also learning the practical side of frontier doctoring. Jake had been teaching her basic medical procedures while she helped him upgrade the ship systems with Viridian technology that could enhance their rescue capabilities. The partnership was working better than either of them had expected. Zara's technical expertise complemented Jake's medical knowledge perfectly, allowing them to solve problems that neither could handle alone. She had already improved their surgical robots and designed new atmospheric processors that could create safe breathing environments for a dozen different species. Their first test came when they received a distress call from a mining station. In the asteroid belt of Kepler 442, a methane leak had poisoned the atmosphere and trapped 17 workers from multiple species in a sealed emergency shelter. The local rescue services said the situation was too dangerous to attempt and recommended writing off the station as a total loss. Standard Galactic Emergency Response Protocol says to wait for specialized hazmat teams, Lisa reported as she read the official response to the distress call. That will take 6 days minimum, and the emergency shelter only has 4 days of life support remaining. Jake was already plotting a course toward the disaster site. Then we better get there in 3 days or less. The journey to Kepler 442 gave Zara her first real taste of how frontier medicine operated. Jake pushed the Harmony to maximum speed, while she worked on modifying their environmental suits to handle methane contamination. They would have only one chance to extract the trapped workers before their life support failed. I have been thinking about the extraction process, Zara said as they approached the mining station. If we can rig a temporary atmospheric processor to the emergency shelter, we might be able to extend their life support while we work. Jake studied her proposed modifications and nodded approvingly. That could work, but it means you would have to go into the contaminated area with me. Lisa cannot handle that kind of technical work under emergency conditions. The prospect of deliberately entering a lethal environment so soon after her own near-death experience should have terrified Zara, but instead she felt only determination. Someone had risked everything to save her life, and now she had the chance to do the same for others. The mining station was a disaster area that rivaled the destruction on Zarian 7. The methane leak had come from a damaged processing facility, and the toxic gas had spread throughout most of the inhabited sections. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off the worst contamination, but the trapped workers were running out of time in their isolated shelter. Jake and Zara worked together to establish contact with the survivors and assess their medical conditions. Several workers were already showing signs of methane poisoning from exposure before reaching the shelter, while others had injuries from the initial accident that caused the leak. Each person would need individual treatment during the extraction process. We can only take 4 people at a time in our environmental transport, Jake said as he studied the layout of the emergency shelter. That means multiple trips through the contaminated zone. Zara had anticipated this problem and designed a solution that combined human ingenuity with Viridian technology. She had modified their atmospheric processor to create a safe corridor between the shelter and their ship, essentially building a temporary tunnel of breathable air. Through the methane cloud, the first extraction went smoothly as Jake and Zara guided 4 injured workers through the safe corridor to the Harmony. Jake handled the medical treatment while Zara managed the atmospheric processor and monitored the integrity of their protective tunnel. Her 4 arms allowed her to operate multiple control systems simultaneously while watching for any signs of equipment failure. "This is incredible," said Commander Steve Phillips, the human officer in charge of the mining station. "How did you create a safe passage through that methane concentration?" Zara explained the technical details while Jake worked on treating the injured workers. The atmospheric processor was based on Viridian air purification technology but modified with human safety redundancies and frontier durability standards. It was exactly the kind of innovation that made frontier medicine so effective. The second extraction proved more challenging. When one of the trapped workers suffered cardiac arrest while being moved through the corridor, Jake had to perform emergency resuscitation in the middle of the contaminated zone while Zara maintained the atmospheric processor and monitored the failing life support systems in the emergency shelter. "I need you to stabilize the corridor while I work on him," Jake called out as he began chest compressions on the unconscious worker. Zara's multiple arms flew across the control panels as she adjusted the processor settings to compensate for the additional load. The safe corridor wavered, but held as Jake brought the worker back from the edge of death. It was exactly the kind of teamwork that made the difference between successful rescues and tragic failures. By the time they extracted the last group of survivors, Zara had gained a deep appreciation for the challenges of frontier medicine. Every rescue was different and required creative solutions developed under extreme pressure. The standard medical protocols that worked in safe, controlled environments often failed completely when applied to real emergency situations. "You did well out there," Jake said as they completed treatment of the last injured worker. Most people need months of training before they can handle that kind of pressure. Zara looked around the medical bay at the 17 people they had saved from certain death. Each survivor represented someone who would have been written off by the standard emergency response system. The big rescue organizations had rules and procedures that prioritized safety and efficiency over individual lives, but Jake had shown her a different approach. "I want to learn everything," Zara said firmly. "Medical procedures, equipment maintenance, emergency protocols, whatever it takes to save lives like this." Jake smiled as he watched her check on the recovering patients. "Then we better get started. The frontier has plenty of people who need saving and not enough doctors willing to do whatever it takes to reach them." Their success at Kepler 442 attracted attention from both the Galactic Medical Authority and other frontier operators. Word spread quickly about the human doctor and Viridian engineer who had accomplished an impossible rescue using innovative techniques that no one else had attempted. Some viewed their methods as dangerous precedents, while others saw them as examples of what frontier medicine could achieve when bureaucratic limitations were removed. 2 years had passed since Jake Morrison pulled Zara Cleth from the ruins of Zarian 7, and their partnership had become legendary throughout the frontier regions. The Harmony now carried the most advanced cross-species medical equipment in known space, with Zara's engineering innovations complementing Jake's surgical expertise to create treatment capabilities that surpassed even the major galactic medical centers. Their latest mission had brought them to the edge of the spiral arm where a plague outbreak on the agricultural world of New Eden threatened to wipe out the entire colonial population. The disease affected multiple species differently, making treatment nearly impossible for conventional medical teams that specialized in single-species protocols. "The bacterial infection mutates every 12 hours, Zara reported as she analyzed samples in their enhanced laboratory. Each species provides a different environment for the pathogen, causing it to evolve in unpredictable directions." Jake studied the data while treating patients in the medical bay. The plague had already killed hundreds of colonists, and traditional treatments were proving useless against the rapidly changing pathogen. The Galactic Health Organization had quarantined the entire system and recommended evacuation of all survivors, effectively abandoning New Eden to the disease. "We need to approach this like an engineering problem rather than a medical one," Jake said. "If the bacteria keeps changing, then our treatment has to change even faster." Zara had already begun working on exactly that solution. She was modifying their biofabrication unit to synthesize new antibiotics in real time, adjusting the molecular structure to match the current mutation of the plague bacteria. It was the kind of innovative approach that the big medical organizations considered too risky to attempt, but which had made Jake and Zara successful where others failed. The treatment protocol they developed required constant monitoring and adjustment as the plague bacteria continued to evolve. Zara used her 4 arms to operate multiple analysis systems simultaneously while Jake administered customized medications to patients from 6 different species. Each person needed slightly different treatment based on their biology and the specific variant of the disease affecting them. "This is impossible," Dr. Linda Warren said as she watched them work. The Galactic Health Organization representative had come to observe their methods and report back to her superiors. "You cannot possibly track all these variables manually." "We are not doing it manually," Zara replied without looking up from her control panels. "The biofabrication unit is linked to our analysis systems and adjusts the treatment formula automatically, based on real-time pathogen data." The integrated approach combined human medical intuition with Viridian technological precision to create a treatment system that could adapt faster than the plague bacteria could evolve. Jake made clinical decisions about patient care while Zara's equipment provided the technological support to implement those decisions effectively. Within 72 hours, they had successfully treated over 300 patients and contained the plague outbreak that had threatened to destroy the entire colony. The success rate was unprecedented for such a complex multi-species epidemic, and word of their achievement spread quickly throughout the galactic medical community. The Galactic Medical Authority wants to meet with you both, Dr. Warren announced, after reviewing their final treatment statistics. They are interested in incorporating your methods into standard emergency response protocols. Jake and Zara exchanged glances. They had always operated independently of the major medical bureaucracies, preferring the freedom to innovate without regulatory oversight. The idea of working within the official system had advantages but also threatened the flexibility that made their approach so effective. What would that mean for our current operations? Zara asked. You would become the flagship team for a new cross-species emergency medical response division, Dr. Warren explained. Full authority to operate anywhere in galactic space unlimited. Resource access and the ability to train other teams in your methods. The offer was tempting because it would allow them to expand their impact far beyond what they could accomplish with a single ship. But Jake had learned to be suspicious of bureaucratic promises after years of dealing with medical administrators who prioritized procedures over results. We would need complete operational independence, Jake said finally. No oversight committees. No mandatory procedures and no requirements to get approval before responding to emergencies. Dr. Warren smiled. Those are exactly the terms they are prepared to offer. Your success rate speaks for itself, and the authority has decided that your methods should be replicated rather than regulated. 6 months later, the cross-species emergency medical response division had become the most effective rescue organization in known space. Jake and Zara trained 12 new teams using their integrated approach, combining human medical expertise with alien technological capabilities to create treatment protocols that could handle any emergency. The Harmony remained their primary vessel, but now led a fleet of similar ships, each equipped with biofabrication units and atmospheric processors based on Zara's designs. Every team included both medical and engineering specialists, following the partnership model that had proven so successful. Remember that equipment is just tools, Jake told a group of new recruits during a training session. The real innovation comes from refusing to accept that someone cannot be saved just because their biology is different or their situation seems impossible. Zara added her own perspective during the technical briefings. Every species has unique capabilities that can contribute to medical solutions. Humans bring determination and adaptability. Viridians offer precision and analysis. Other species contribute their own strengths. Success comes from combining those capabilities rather than working in isolation. Their latest mission brought them back to Zarian 7, where the mining operations had resumed after the asteroid damage was repaired. The planet had been transformed from a disaster zone into a thriving industrial center, but Jake and Zara were there for a different reason. They stood in the rebuilt communications center where Zara had nearly died 4 years earlier. The new facility was larger and better designed, with emergency systems that could have prevented the tragedy that had brought them together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not picked up your life signs that day? Jake asked as they looked out at the busy mining operations. Zara considered the question carefully. I would have died alone and forgotten, just another casualty of bureaucratic indifference. Instead, I learned that individuals can make a difference when institutions fail. Their partnership had saved thousands of lives and revolutionized emergency medicine throughout the galaxy, but it had started with one simple decision to help someone who had been abandoned by everyone else. Jake had proven that human compassion could overcome any obstacle when combined with determination and innovation. Harmony control. We have a distress signal from the Centauri system. Lisa's voice announced over the communication system. Multiple casualties from a transport accident, several different species involved. Jake and Zara looked at each other and smiled. After 4 years of working together, they could communicate entire conversations with just a glance. Someone needed help and they would provide it, just as they always had. Set course for Centauri, Jake ordered as they headed back to their ship. Maximum speed. The Harmony lifted off from Zarian 7 and jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward another impossible rescue that somehow they would find a way to make possible.